Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with a midweek update in the world of cannabis. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it, as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos, and then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. And we're going to start with this news from Cy Snyder, so thank you, Cy Snyder, for sharing this, who shares breaking news out of Pennsylvania. And this was a call from Monday from John Fetterman, who is the Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor, calls on PoTuS to deschedule cannabis as a Schedule 1 drug ahead of Pittsburgh visit. So we love to see this. A lieutenant governor in the U.S. trying to hold the president accountable for the campaign promises that he told the American people that he would fulfill if they voted for him. And so more information here about the potential visit. It's a long time past that we finally decriminalized cannabis, said Fetterman. The president needs to use his executive authority to begin descheduling cannabis. I would love to see him do this prior to his visit to Pittsburgh. This is just common sense, and Pennsylvanians overwhelmingly support decriminalizing cannabis. So well said, John Fetterman. Hopefully the U.S. might, listen to what he has to say and take this a little seriously. But as of right now, it seems Tom Engel reports, yikes. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre asked if President Joe Biden will heed John Fetterman's call to follow through on his cannabis campaign pledges, and she said, "We just don't have anything to speak to, and we don't have anything new to share," essentially saying, what campaign promises? And so while that's not very reassuring, hopefully we'll be pleasantly surprised by something. Most likely not, but there's still a lot of time from now until November for the Dems to act and keep their campaign promises and pass some sort of incremental SAFE Plus reform that will get people out of jail and allow the cannabis industry to flourish by getting the cash off the streets and into banks. And so with that, ETF.com does share cannabis legislation could buoy associated ETFs. Unfortunately, it seems like ETF buying is helping buoy our favorite U.S. exposured ETFs, which we'll take in the meantime. As it reports, in November, 7 states will hold votes on ballot initiatives to legalize cannabis. Should they pass, the beleaguered cannabis industry, which has exhibited dramatically bad performance for at least the past 12 months, I mean, the share prices have, but fundamentally they have been staying afloat despite having both hands tied behind their backs, could get a needed boost from expansion into these states: Arkansas, Maryland, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, Oklahoma, and South Dakota. And while unfortunately there are efforts from prohibitionists to block these ballot initiatives, many of them are still expected to be on the ballot. And so the good news is we'll talk about the two ETFs, ETF MG, Alternative Harvest ETF, which is MJ, reading that through. MJ is one that has exposure to US MSOs. Its total assets have fluctuated, at times surpassing $1 billion since its coverage switch. Meanwhile, the actively managed Advisor Shares Pure US Cannabis ETF, MSOS, the other well-known one, which launched in September 2020, has $682 million of assets under management, and MSOS only overtook MJ as the largest U.S.-listed cannabis ETF around the start of this year. As MJ is global in nature and primarily invests in equities, though its largest holding at nearly 17% of its portfolio is the MJUS ETF, which is the new recently announced U.S.-focused fund that can hold multi-state operators and special purpose acquisition companies. Multi-state operators can own cannabis operations in multiple states where they grow. Essentially, U.S.-based cannabis companies process and distribute cannabis within a single state where cannabis is legal, which allows them to avoid running afoul of federal laws. And MSOS similarly can invest in such firms and mainly uses swaps to achieve that exposure. Swaps sometimes are the best way to gain access to such firms. Now, it doesn't necessarily say if MJUS uses swaps much like MSOS, but regardless, this just highlights that there are now two ETFs out there that give you exposure to the U.S.-based cannabis companies and not, Canadian LPs as well. And so a peek inside, just going to scroll down to highlight that MSOS is slightly cheaper at 0.73% versus the 0.75 MER for MJ, and has slightly better liquidity and trading stats apparently. And then so a peek inside, more information just if you wanted to pause to learn about these ETFs. And so with that, just happy to share LogicPrevials, highlighting that yesterday's position changes in MJUS appear to be highlighting that ETFs are in fact buying up shares of these very undervalued U.S. multi-state operators, especially the tier 1 ones here. Plus tier 2 included Columbia Care that will merge with Cresco Labs most likely, but the latest holdings file reports up to $81.2 million of net assets. So obviously, thank you to these ETF providers that are buying up these very beat up stocks and helping us see a little bit of green in the last few weeks up until now. And so with that though, just highlighting that while Alexis Barron tweets, MJ trades much better and always has, we've got Dougie Kass, who appears to be bullish again, who says, who cares that it is more liquid, as he's focusing on fundamentals, highlighting that MJ consists of overvalued Canadian LPs that trade a much higher enterprise value to sales than MSOs, hence why he's focusing on the US-based companies that are actually very close to profitability compared to the Canadian LPs. And then with that, just to highlight that apparently Dougie Kass is adding to his cannabis holdings, and so it seems like he's become bullish again with all the momentum that I've been reporting on. He seems to be optimistic. I'm optimistic. While we plan accordingly, we do hope to be pleasantly surprised and that the Dems might keep some of their campaign promises, right, and get something done, as they've done nothing. And so with that, Tom Engel does report some other beneficial news overall towards cannabis, as Gallup says that more Americans now smoke cannabis than have smoked a tobacco cigarette in the past week, and that cannabis use is likely to continue increasing even more in years to come, which is obviously the trend. We're seeing that, and so this is positive to hear as alcohol consumption is going down, cannabis consumption is going up. And obviously that's likely going to lead to less deaths in society. And also more people use cannabis edibles than smoke cigarettes. So another interesting stat. So just sharing this as I relayed a lot of more information, but it's just highlighting that people's habits are shifting, and so that's likely going to be very beneficial to the cannabis industry in time if you can, play the long game. And so Americans' cannabis use, keeping in mind that all of your answers in this survey are confidential. Have you yourself ever happened to try cannabis? Keeping in mind that all your answers in the survey are confidential. Do you yourself smoke cannabis? And so you can just pause to read for some highlights here, and then the story I'll put in the description below. While also coming from CNBC, cannabis drinks pop up as companies bet on growing market for legal cannabis. And so companies are betting people will want cannabis drinks as the market for legal cannabis expands. Again, reiterating the point that cannabis is becoming much more popular than tobacco and alcohol. Drinks are being marketed as an alternative to alcohol with probably a lot less harmful side effects, not getting too drunk that you black out and do something that you regret, or any unplanned physical altercation, drunk driving, losing your shit, not being able to find it, just being an irresponsible clown. Without a doubt, legalizing cannabis and seeing alcohol subside in popularity will have a much more beneficial public health impact on society, regardless of what experts want to try and say. But then, of course, you can't share a little bit of truth without bringing in the negative, highlighting that experts say dosing is a concern, and note the lack of research about the drinks. Well, then let's deschedule cannabis so we can finally research the effects of these drinks, and no doubt they will have less harmful effects or less harmful impacts than what alcohol currently has right now, no doubt. So with that, on to some state news. Thanks, Todd Harrison, for sharing this one. Takeaways from New Mexico's first 4 months of recreational cannabis. New Mexico's new industry has many around the state excited for its potential economic impact, like funding for public education, tourism opportunities for potential business owners, and more. And so obviously the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition speak for themselves, and while I'm not going to go through the whole article, you can grab the link below if you're interested to learn more about New Mexico and how their program is going after launching, I believe it was in April of this year. But just to highlight, what do projections look like going forward? And so at the beginning, Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham in April said she expects the state's industry to do $350 million in sales the first year. For now though, White's forecast for the first year stand at about $250 to $300 million, so they walked that back a bit, something he called a conservative estimate. He did, however, come up with a fiscal year sales forecast, which goes from July 2022 to June 2023, that stands at about $300 million to $350 million. So taking some time to ramp up, but they're still expecting $300 million starting from, say, July to next year. His first forecast initially predicted $360 million in sales over the 2023 fiscal year, as White came up with that estimate by using sales numbers from April and comparing growth rates in other recreational markets. And they finish humbly by adding, we know that New Mexico was not the first mover on this, but clearly they're happy that they started because they're seeing the industry flourish, and now they're hopefully going to make changes to help it continue to flourish along the way. And so with that, an unfortunate new development in Florida, and we'll see how this affects the medical industry from now until 2024, when they can hopefully get the ballot initiative and legalize for adult use in Florida. Florida sets limits on medical cannabis dosage and supply, and so Florida health officials have released a highly anticipated rule setting THC dosage amount and supply limits on products doctors can order for medical cannabis patients. The emergency rule sets a 70-day total supply limit of 24,500 milligrams of THC for non-smokable cannabis and establishes dosage caps for different routes of administration such as edibles, inhalation, and tinctures. Why? The rule, which was sent to patients and doctors on Friday and went into effect Monday, also carries out a state law that imposed a 2.5-ounce limit on smokable cannabis purchased over a 35-day period. While the rule lays out limits for THC in non-smokable products, the limit for whole flower and other products that can be smoked are based on weight. They are not based on levels of THC, the euphoria-inducing component in cannabis, and so apparently they're using that argument that it's weight and not THC level. And the emergency rule creates a process for doctors to seek an override for patients they believe need to exceed the limit. So not saying that if you need a lot more just based on your condition, you're not able to access it, but they're just trying to, put a cap on to limit, the amount of people using cannabis. Still, regardless, hard to make that argument, but they're making exceptions for people that need more. The rule does not identify a way for patients the rule does not identify a way for patients or doctors to appeal if the requests are denied. And so the dosing and supply caps came nearly 6 years after Florida voters approved a constitutional amendment broadly legalizing medical cannabis, and more than 3 years after the legislature, at the behest of Governor Ron DeSantis, authorized smokable cannabis. And so interesting to see how this will affect Florida over time. I don't know if it'll affect too much because obviously I imagine there's still a lot of patients. We know that there's over 700. We're getting close to 750,000 in Florida, at least, that are accessing. And so obviously if every single patient has a limit, there's so many patients that it likely still won't affect sales at this point, but just be interesting to see if this does have a greater effect over time. And so with that, a few other state developments. Marijuana Moment reports Missouri Democrats divided over cannabis legalization ballot initiative as details emerge on FBI probe into cannabis lobbying efforts. But the good news I'd say from Missouri is we're feeling good about our odds going into November. And just funny is this seems to be coming from someone who you would assume would vote Republican in the fall. I assure you I will not be voting Democrat just because I'm a young voter. I'll be voting yes on 3, but legal cannabis is not just Democrats. They may be shocked to find out they're wrong. And so regardless, that just means a positive outcome for cannabis if it can manage to stay on the ballot for Missouri and have the citizens of Missouri vote an overwhelming yes. And with that, Todd Harrison shares Mississippi Burning. Now this is a podcast from MississippiToday.org, just mainly highlighting that according to the podcast, they can't even tell us definitively. They can only use the word could too. But as of right now, it seems like medical cannabis could hit the shelves in Mississippi as soon as October. And so good to see progress slowly but surely coming out of these red states that take a lot longer time to get things done. But not all good news as well. Mississippi, we could see that in October. This one just taking a life of its own again. We got some news out of Georgia. Georgia medical cannabis production still at a standstill. And so these were lawsuits filed by organizations in Georgia that felt that they were misrepresented or were not included in the lottery for the winners and licenses. And so still no indication at this point that we're going to have the licenses issued and grant anytime in the near future. Unfortunately, says Alan Peake, the only people who lose out on this are those in Georgia that need access to a safer medicinal alternative than opioids. So while this does suck, hopefully they can find a solution sooner than later and help get medical cannabis to those in Georgia that need it. And so on to some MSO news. This medical weed dispensary in Bordentown, NJ, might start selling recreational weed soon. And so New Jersey's 20th adult use dispensary might be opening soon in Central Jersey, as Curaleaf in Bordentown, currently operating as a medical-only cannabis dispensary, is about to go before a state panel for approval to additionally start selling recreational cannabis, according to NJ.com. And so with that, just a bit more info on here. If approved by the Cannabis Regulatory Commission at the meeting in a couple of weeks, and so a few weeks from now, we will find out if this is official. Adult sales would start soon thereafter, and they will become New Jersey's 19th dispensary to sell recreational cannabis. Kind of confusing when they say at this point right here, New Jersey's 20th adult use dispensary might soon. So clearly, one of these is right. Is it 19 or 20? I don't know, but hey, 94.5 PSD. Please try and figure this out before you hit publish, okay? So, great. And so regardless, good news for Curaleaf. While Cresco Labs announces 3 new Sunnyside dispensaries in Florida, and so this is as of August 30th. Yesterday announced the expansion of its Sunnyside retail brand in Florida with 3 new dispensaries in Cape Coral, Tampa Bay, and Tampa and Panama City Beach, Florida. These additional stores bring Cresco's store network to 19 locations in Florida and 53 total in the U.S. So good to see Cresco continuing to expand in Florida as well. Definitely preparing for that 2024 ballot initiative to see adult use come to Florida, where they've got over 100 million tourists annually and 21 million residents there. And so you can pause read for more information, but good to see Cresco continuing to execute as well. Well, I've got some interesting visuals I wanted to share. This one from a new account that I found, Green Wave Advisors, highlighting continued execution by the Tier 1 MSOs in generating enough cash to pay the 280E tax burden and then come very close to still being profitable. For further analysis, sign up for the Green Wave Buzz at greenwaveadvisors.com. So not necessarily promoting them, but just sharing this very well put together post. So thank you, Green Wave Advisors, for sharing this. Obviously, if you want to visit their site, you can grab the link below and go check it out. But quite cool. Taxes paid as a percentage of cash flow from operations, looking back at 2019, 2020, 2021, and second half, I think, of 2022. And so regardless, we love to see the Tier 1 MSOs looking this healthy by comparison, because it tells us that if they didn't have to pay the predatory 280E tax, they would definitely be profitable by now. And so while the source is company filings for each individual company, we can assume, and GWA, which is Green Wave Advisors estimates, green bar highlighting that the CFO was fully sufficient to pay taxes, essentially meaning taxes have been paid and the company is good, while the blue bar represents the CFO partially sufficient to pay taxes, while the red one is the CFO insufficient. So not ideal also to see that TerraSend and Air have been unable to pay taxes thus far this year, but obviously it just means that they could be waiting to pay taxes in the second half of the year. So it's not all bad, but just goes to show the difference between the Tier 1 MSOs and then the other Tier 2s and Tier 3s. And so this is obviously where the risk comes in. Obviously higher risk, higher reward, but these are the much more solid fundamental companies that you'd want to be investing in. And imagine once they get 280E taken away, they'll be that much more profitable, and then some of the fastest growing companies in the US already. With that, Green Wave Advisor shares another one. If intent of Fed excise tax is to replace the lost 280E revenues, clearly the 25% proposed by the Dems is excessive, obviously, and we do not, that's another reason why we did not want COA, why it's dead on arrival, why Dems wouldn't even vote for it. And so update for first half of 2022 reveals the average increase to 12%, perhaps attributed to improved gross margins, as some MSOs that are fully integrated have pivoted more towards retail. And so MSOs average 280E tax as percentage of revenues, and we can see in 2019 it was about 11%, 2020 11%, 2021 10%, but then in the first half of 2022 up to 12%. And so just highlighting again how much profits unfortunately are still stuck going to the government based on the outdated draconian laws that could be going to the MSOs and that will be going to shareholders once we can get some sort of fix. And again, we're waiting on that hopefully from now until November if the Dems can keep their campaign promises, and show that they work for the American people for once. Well, last one from Zain highlighting interesting to see how the market has been a bit more selective in the recent rally versus prior selling that felt sweeping and indiscriminate. Reminds me of the phrase that in a crash, the correlation of everything goes to 1. And so just to share these images. So thank you again, Zain, for putting these together. Apparently the source is Yahoo Finance for all of it. And so indexed average share price of U.S. cannabis MSO per set. So obviously good to see this little bounce back to life after this dreadful 15 months or 18 months that we've gone through, despite the MSOs are only becoming stronger and more solid fundamentally while their share prices have been taking this hit. But share price changes by phase. We can see GTI here, Cresco, Ascend, Verano, TrueLeaf, Curaleaf, Air Wellness, and it's looking at number 1 pre-COVID price to rally peak. From January 31st, 2020 to the 2021 peak. Number 2, rally peak to recent low, 2021 peak to noted 2022 bottom as of essentially, mid-June, where we just went through. And then 3, recent low to current, 2022 bottom to August 26, 2022. So obviously this is positive and we like to see this bounce back. Will it continue? The stage is set for it, but we'll have to wait and see. And so last few ones to share, just the main reason again why we harp on getting Safe Pass sooner than later, because it will make America safer. It will increase public health, not decrease it. And here's another prime example. St. Louis and surrounding area is seeing a rash of cannabis-related attempted robberies in recent days. Dems, do your fucking job. Safe banking would largely help solve these types of issues for these small operators, because the operators would be able to put their cash in the banks and they could take credit card payments and not have to deal in cash. So where are you at, Schmuck Schumer? PoTuS, come on, keep your campaign promises, because it's just getting ridiculous.
So crime alert spanning the metro, thieves busting up and into a marijuana dispensary, but this is not a one-off crime. In fact, it's becoming a repeated scene as thieves think they'll get lucky and get some legal weed. However, security cameras at these dispensaries are catching the criminals at each and every move.
In fact, just this morning, there were 3 attempted thefts. This map shows those cannabis crimes. One happened in Jefferson County, the other 2 in the city of St. Louis, but there have been more in St. Louis County in recent days.
And News 4's Shoshana Stahl is live, finding that police have a joint operation that's going to stop this. Shoshana.
Yeah, right now you can see these boarded up doors behind me. This comes after the latest attempt at a break-in at the Greenlight dispensary in Berkeley on Saturday, where someone tried to drive through these doors to break in. And then earlier today, take a look at this right here. These cement barricades were added just hours ago in the hopes of preventing any more damage.
Almost lead one to believe that the Dems are actually enabling all this crime so that they can keep crying systemic racism and blame it on the system as opposed to themselves, which is just pathetic and shameful to say the least. But some good news to end this off, as thank you, Aaron, for sharing your success story. I've never smoked pot in my life. The back pain associated with my open heart surgery is truly horrific, almost pass out bad. I didn't want to stay on fentanyl or oxy, so I tried these weed gummies, took every ounce of pain away, and I slept for 8 hours. So thankful. I'm so proud of you, Aaron, for having the courage to switch and for sharing your story as well. So, hopefully this is obviously a true story, another success story that we love to hear, but especially as this shows how med schools are doing such a terrible job at educating our future doctors about this wonder plant and the medical benefits, leaving so many Americans to be stuck suffering on opioids, potentially developing addictions, versus being able to treat their pain with a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative like cannabis. And get this is a relevant study just based on the last one, highlighting someone that was stuck on opioids for a while, tried cannabis, and now, wow, they've gotten their life back, as High Times shares qualitative study reveals medical students' attitudes towards medical pot. A new study examines medical students' perceptions of medical cannabis, including its efficacy, appropriateness in medicine, possible adverse effects, and patient value. But you're not going to like the attitudes of a lot of these doctors, I can guarantee it. So we scroll down. Overall, participants reported what they believed were potential therapeutic uses of medical cannabis, including cancer care, AIDS care, chronic disease management, pain management, digestive issues, appetite stimulation, help with nausea, Parkinson's disease, anxiety and depression, glaucoma, PTSD, sleep disorders, and multiple sclerosis, okay? So, of course, they know and they can acknowledge many potential medical benefits. Great. Now, obviously, descheduling will make it a lot easier for any potential doctors or researchers to act on these benefits, but I digress. Some agreed that medical cannabis may have a viable role in medicine, though there were also concerns about the potential harmful effects. And it's so sad because this is still just propaganda, and you do have to wonder the incentive and the influence that Big Pharma has on swaying these doctors to opioids as band-aid solutions compared to also offering a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative that might also give you the ability to look inward and identify the root of the problem so that you can solve it yourself, as opposed to needing band-aid solutions. But the prohibitionist propaganda does not end, as many also believe cannabis was highly addictive. You could say it is a habit-forming or addictive for some, but to say that it's blanket highly addictive for everyone is, again, really just misrepresenting the data, either physiologically or psychologically. Again, according to these med students that have been indoctrinated in whatever they're being taught, several participants also said, get this, that patients are not capable of managing their own medical cannabis use, or that patients might misuse medical cannabis by giving it away or selling it to others. What kind of elitist mindset are they developing that they're just basically calling all of their potential patients thieves that cannot be trusted? It's mind-blowing. So I'm just happy that I found this so I can share how ridiculous this is, really. Some participants said that they were comfortable with physicians recommending medical cannabis through telehealth conferencing, while others said it should be done face-to-face, with one participant noting that it opens up an opportunity for people to beat the system. Like, what does that even mean? It's just about people being able to live their life and choose what medicine that they take without risk of dying or potentially developing addiction. As researchers also noted that participants often spoke about recreational cannabis without distinguishing it from medically prescribed cannabis, with the facilitators reminding participants in each of the 8 focus groups at least twice to be mindful of that distinction. And while that technically may be true because the female cannabis plant is the plant that produces high THC cannabis, which can be sold as medical cannabis or recreational cannabis, regardless, you would just hope that these med students would, take the idea of medical cannabis a little bit more seriously and make that distinction and treat it as a medicine. But researchers add and said it was unsettling how participants spoke of the dangers of medical cannabis use with unsubstantiated authority, citing that medical students' concerns around medical cannabis have been reported in previous studies. While equally unsettling is this idea, according to participants, that patients are incapable of recognizing signs of their illnesses and knowing their own bodies, which could be dangerous to the patient as they don't know what they need for their own condition or they don't know what they are feeling, which is, again, the most insane part of this whole study. And so I'm just going to go through that because that's essentially what I found most revealing that I wanted to share. But interestingly enough, that is what it seems med students view cannabis, or at least that's the collective idea that a lot of them have. So you can grab the whole article if you wanted to read, but clearly it seems like none of them have visited pubmed.gov and searched in cannabis to get the over 29,000 results. And clearly, as time goes on, more and more potential positive medical benefits and uses for the cannabis plant. So just happy to share this information because this is what's really happening on the ground, despite what med schools are teaching students and, despite what influence and potential incentives from big industries like Big Pharma are getting in the way. And so with that, just to round this off, a little global tour as Todd Harrison shares German Chancellor Olaf Scholz reiterating, saying cannabis should be legalized pretty quickly, though he has never smoked it himself. And this doesn't even really matter. Whole point being that is they are writing up the legislation, hopefully to get it done by the end of 2022 so that they can pass the legislation in 2023 and launch their legal adult use program in 2024. That's the timeline that we got beforehand, but this is at least in line with getting the legislation done, which will help legalize it more or sooner than later in 2023. And then the last one, hey, Mexico, guess who's back? Back again. So thanks, Todd Harrison, for sharing this one. As Mexico Senate Majority Leader said, lawmakers will pass a cannabis legalization law in the new session beginning on Thursday. And so they're not going to pass the law on Thursday, but they're going to pass it in a new session that begins on Thursday. So you hate to see it, but at least it's good to see that Mexico is back and making these claims because, well, I think it was a year ago that they promised that they would actually pass legislation to launch an adult use market after the Supreme Court deemed that their cannabis laws or their current laws were unconstitutional. We've only seen a delay, and Mexico's politicians have simply just disappeared off the face of the earth. So good to see them back. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean it's happening anytime soon, but I can at least hold Mexico Senate accountable since they've given us a new timeline. And so happy to share that. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Sunday for This Week in Cannabis News. Have a great week, everybody.